Yep, I'm okay with that. So actually, we'll reverse them. Is that okay with you, Jack?
What's that?
If we reverse the agenda, so that way Mike's not here forever.
Oh, let's absolutely do that. Yeah, yeah.
Just go right backward. As long as they're on the agenda. Are we on already?
Yeah.
Oh.
Is the light on?
Rena, will you be along? Oh, and you're here. Look at you. Is there funding something or granting?
Did I leave stuff in the machine? Rena, did I leave stuff in the machine on you? Did I leave stuff in the machine on you?
It's on you, but it's like
Oh, thank you.
Seeing that it is 6:31, I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'll read all the disclaimers first. And as soon as I've called our meeting to order, then I'll allow the Select Board to call their meeting to order. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page, https://www.facebook.com/lunenburg-cable-157-427-270-975-305/ and will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube after the meeting. The meeting will be held in person here at the Bellata Room in Town Hall. Members of the public are welcome to attend. I'm glad to see some folks here. In person, please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting will not be suspended nor terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast, unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with particular interest in any specific item on this agenda should make plans for an in-person versus virtual attendance. Remote participation from a computer, please use the link. I will read it to you. To join the public meeting, it's the https://us020web.zoom.us/j/82071757337 ? Password for that is capital U, 2, lowercase tx, capital O, capital E, lowercase t, the number 6, lowercase c, capital D, lowercase g, x, a, capital U, 5, capital I, capital Y, lowercase k, h, I, d, the number 3, lowercase l, I, uppercase k, 2, w, lowercase w, y, uppercase u, t, the 09. Or you can join the Zoom meeting at the meeting ID number is 820.
Recording in progress.
Well, that's good. We're relieved. The meeting ID is 820-7175-7337, and the passcode for that is 344647. From a telephone, you may dial 888-475-4499 and enter the same webinar ID, which is 820-715-7337 #. If you have not registered for Zoom, you will be asked for your name and an email address. No participant ID is required. Just press the # when asked. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. The agenda lists all topics which may be discussed in the meeting and are those which are reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. I will now call the Board of Assessors to order, and then we'll introduce each other, and then we'll ask the Select Board to call their meeting to order.
John Rabbit?
Brian LaFond,
Sarah Cammer. Rena Sweezy.
Select Board,
Is Selectman Inke present in the room?
yes, she is.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Selectman Inke. I will call the Select Board meeting to order, seeing Mr. Lou Franco, myself, Michael Ray Jeffries, and Selectman Inke present in the room.
Thank you. Opening comments, is there anything from the board?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Rabbit, please.
If you think I'm going to be answering all the emails you sent to me at 2 o'clock in the morning as you were getting ready for this, my wife says you're nuts. Thank you, that's my closing.
Your wife is accurate,
Yes, she is.
and a lovely woman.
She is at that. And yours as well.
Well, thanks.
And Deb's saying the same thing.
Any other comment from the board?
No.
Rita, did you want to mention your,
Yes. Today, I spoke with Heather, and because we've started a new year, I don't have to stick to the 23 hours a week. I can keep the office open from 8 to 4 every day until probably the end of May, till we get through the abatements. But where there's only one person, I just thought it's better to have the office more accessible, because we're going to get a little bit busier. So I agreed to allow me to do that. So the office will be open from 8 to 4 each day.
Excellent.
thanks very much, Rena.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your offer to help us keep the office open.
Thank you, Rena. Thank you very much.
Very helpful, thank you. Today, under current business, I'm sorry, I need to ask if there is anyone else from the public that would like to speak. Feel free, come on up.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. Good evening.
Hey, Carl.
I'm happy to see that we're going to have an update on the 5-year reevaluation tonight, so that's super. As you're well aware, there's been several basic questions regarding this reevaluation that have been bothering us for a while that hopefully will get addressed tonight. But I would like to highlight or remind of some of the key ones as I see them. First, we know that the process very early is dependent upon the qualified sales. Highly confident that we'll have good qualified sales this year as opposed to last year. But once we have those, the next step requires the calculation of the ASRs for those qualified sales. And that's, I think, where the calculation process begins. The question is, particularly for lakefront properties, where will the assessment piece of the assessment to sales ratio come from? And there appears to be a few obvious candidates. One which would normally apply would be the 2023 assessments. However, we know that those are fatally flawed and have 135% in the land value, and that they just weren't correct. Doesn't mean it can't be used, but that's one of the options. The next option I see is that you use the 2023 abated values, which presumably were good at the time. But one problem is that not all lakefront properties applied for abatements, so they don't all have abated values. The third option seems to be to use the values that have been updated in the vision cards that are currently on the website. Those, I believe, were generated primarily to generate the tax bills, preliminary tax bills. But they also are flawed in that they, for some unknown reason at this point, they have an added 4% to 8% been added to the land value above and beyond the abatements. They reflect the abatements pretty well, but somebody stuck in a 48% bump. So it doesn't seem appropriate that those are clean, ready to use. So I just don't know which one. So the question is, where's the assessment number in the sales, assessment to sales ratio going to come from for the 24 sales taxes? Okay. Another question would be, in the evaluation process, will the lakefront classifications that were generated during the abatement process, the good, average, below average, will those be carried forward? Will they be reassessed during this process in terms of what categories these houses belong into? Or will they be thrown out altogether? So how are they going to play into this current assessment process? The third question is, if the rating system, good, average, below average, is used, will the lakefront property qualified sales be grouped into those three categories? It seems that they should be, if you're going to use those to evaluate the properties, but I'd like to get confirmation, will they be grouped in? And if they are grouped in those categories, what happens when we don't have the 2% quantity that is needed for the calculations? What then is going to be the process? And then finally, for each of the lakefront properties, when we get through all the calculations, if there is an adjustment that's determined to be appropriate and recommended to the board, similar to the first question, what base is that adjustment going to be applied to? The 2023 stupid assessment, the 2020, right? The 2024, which is flawed? Which one? No idea. So I think it would be, at this point in the process, those questions must have been answered in the process, I would think. So I would hope we would get the answer to all of those and many more that I didn't belabor tonight. So, tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for raising those, Carl. And I assume that many of your questions will be addressed pretty directly, and there may be some that we'll have to address later. Thank you. And, sorry. Okay.
Phyllis Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. My question for you tonight is, when will residents have access to the 2024 assessment data, including how any adjustments were calculated? When will there be a public meeting to share the results of this process and recommendations? At that public meeting, still to be determined, will residents be able to ask questions and get the answers they need? This debacle, as you well know, has festered in our town for over a year now. It's past time for the town to finally provide answers. Tonight, we respectfully request that residents in attendance through the board be allowed to ask questions as appropriate in response to the vision presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a question on the... Is there a question from Zoom? Well, I believe Mr. McDonald had his hand up.
Dave, can you hear us?
If not, we'll hold on that. Are there any other questions? Please.
Michael Ray.
We can't hear Michael Ray yet. I know.
Mike Ray Jeffries, Chairman of the Lunenburg Select Board, 1170 Massachusetts Avenue. So I just want to thank the board for the work that you guys have done. I know that coming out of last year, there was a call to get volunteers to come into this board to help ensure that there were some lessons learned from the last process and that there was adequate oversight into this process. So I want to thank the three members of the Board of Assessors for all the work you've done over the past year to arrive at this point today. We at the Select Board certainly look forward to being here with you, to hearing the presentation as it comes forward. We know that this took a little bit longer than all of us had hoped. But I welcome the information that you have and trusting that a lot of the questions that were raised last year during that process from residents, and I think some of them raised today, critically, are how did you arrive at this number? How do you assess homes? And while I've learned the answer to that question over the past year, it would be helpful to hear tonight the process that the board went through to arrive at the evaluations that are going to be presented. So again, thank you for the work that you have. The select board did post a meeting, we will be here in attendance. I'm expecting that we likely will have our monitors off, but I will ask that from time to time that you will provide an opportunity for members of the public, including members of the select board, to ask clarifying questions.
Thank you. I wish I could say that it was our pleasure. It's been a lot of work. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm
Oh, you are? Good. Thank you.
Thank you, sorry for that. One of the things I just want to say is, it's been a year ago and it has been a turmoil year. It's been a year of hell for a lot of people, and I just want to say that I'm so proud of living in Lunenburg with a board like you guys. It's been so great working and seeing the progress you guys have made. And for that, I just want to thank Sarah for joining. Sarah, I heard the other night you're out, and I just can't thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you did for the town. It was really needed at this time. And a lot of people are watching tonight to see if this is going to be corrected. And we have our trust. At least we have my trust and my wife's trust in making the right decisions for the town. With everything going on in the town, we need some good news, and tonight I hope we're going to get it from you guys. But again, Sarah, thank you for joining and helping.
Welcome, Dave.
We're going to actually do some agenda flex. We have, I have this written up essentially backward, because I originally had a recommendation for the 2025 overlay next, then the public disclosure notice and impact. I think we're going to start with Mike Torillo from Vision. Mike is going to be giving us a talk about the process that Vision went through to determine the preliminary, remember I said preliminary, I'll save it 100 times today, preliminary market value. He'll be taking questions from the Board of Assessors. This is a working meeting where you can see the Board of Assessors do a review with our vendor. This was not intended to be questions and answers with the public. We can do that at a later time. If you have questions, please write them down. We will take them, and we will make sure that they get, we will try to make sure they get responded to. To be quite honest with you, it's sometimes difficult to answer a question later on because something else has come through and partially answered the question. So he will then discuss some of the conclusions and trends that are derived from the preliminary data. Tonight we'll be focusing on the residential values and historical values. We just went through a process where we audited the abatement log. The abatements were done, and we have a record of them, but because of the quality of some of the data that was on the log itself, on the spreadsheet, we couldn't marry it all together, so we spent the entire weekend and most of this morning auditing and repairing that list so now we can do analysis, but I can't have done it yet because we just finished. So we'll be doing some analysis based upon the abated values for those people who had abatements last year. We just today received the information on apartments, industrials, commercials, mixed use, and exempts. We expect to hold a separate meeting to discuss them. I'm not sure when that'll be held. We'll have to talk about when the best time is for that. The Board of Assessors is reviewing the preliminary values by evaluating it from several perspectives that Mike will be delineating. Based on our findings, some adjustments will likely result from this review. Once we are confident these values are made reasonable and fair, we will approve them and then send them to the Department of Revenue for their review, who will also review them for reasonableness and fairness and in all likelihood make changes. One of the questions that came up was around public disclosure. We'll be talking about public disclosure right after Mike gets done, so I will address that piece for everybody. And at that, I think it's okay to go ahead and introduce Mike Torillo from Vision Government Systems? Solutions. I wrote it wrong.
Both. I
Well-
think it'll work. Is this on now?
Is it green?
Should be. Yes, it's green.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Board. I also want to thank you for all your assistance over the last few months with all the work that you've done, also with Rena from the Assessor's Office. So it's been a little bit of a challenge to go through everything in the shorter time period, but we've been able to do all the procedures required to do. And tonight what I'll do is just go through the process, talk a little bit about some of the sales data and what we used. And I did have some of the answers to those questions that you asked, so I'll get those built into this conversation. And then I'm going to go through and I put something that I think is going to be somewhat significant because there were a lot of abatements that weren't recorded in the system. Tonight, like you said, we're going to talk about the historical values, and then we're going to talk about the present values now. So because of some of the things that occurred in the town over the last year, the changes in value, old to news, are going to be pretty inconsistent. But I think that's because we're trying to make them consistent, so there's going to be changes that are going to need to be corrected, with some classes showing from last time a significant drop and some seeing a significant increase. And I think it's just based on the data that we had. So basically, I'll go through the process, and then I'll go through with the sheet that you have some of the percent changes. So and again, this is all preliminary, but it has to be gone through with you to approve it, so that we can then move on to have the Department of Revenue go through and do their process. So it's good that we have a lot of different people looking at it, because there were a lot of adjustments made and a lot of corrections and guidance by the sales for the ratios. So before I start, just a quick, for the guidelines, the state requires that we be between 90 and 110% for fair market value. We're not going to be at 110%. We're going to be between 90 and 100 for most of the ratios, and the average is about 95% for the 1 year of sales, which is 2022 to 2023. However, for smaller sample size, I also looked and qualified older sales in 21 and in 23 as a guide. They weren't set as a ratio for certification, but for additional data to make sure that there was reasonableness in the data we had. But we had enough data in the areas we relied mostly on the current sales.
Current being?
2020.
Thank you.
All right. Also, we are making sure that our adjustments are under the required for land of 20%, for commercials 15% COD, coefficient of dispersion, which is basically kind of like the bell curve table. The tighter the curve, the tighter the data, the tighter the COD. So making sure that we have the COD under 10% for residentials, for the different categories that we're analyzing. Okay, so that's kind of some of the guidelines that we're playing with tonight. So what we started out to do was complete a revaluation for fiscal year 24. So we analyzed analysis on all the properties throughout the community. We included updating construction costs, depreciation schedules, land values, income and expense information we analyzed, and capitalization rates for the commercials. These are some of the foundation data that we use to build the tables that set the values for the required parameters, ratios, CODs. The first process is to review all the sales properties for the land and building characteristics, and to verify the sales through MLS, through working with the assessor, through investigation, physically investigating them, and then making sure that they were arm's length transactions. So the team went out and looked at all the sales based on data collection guidelines that have been developed by the assessor, approved by the board. reviewed by Vision, and followed as we looked at each site for location and amenities and for characteristics. We went through the buildings for construction characteristics, the style of the property, the condition, the quality of construction, any outbuildings, extra features, and we went through all of those. Then we went through and took all this information, entered any changes into the system, into the camera system, recalculated, checked for any errors with our error log, and then we went and started to do an analysis, starting with looking at land values through land sales, improved sales by extracting out the building value and depreciation to get residuals. And we determined that through this process, we have what's called a base land curve for residential. We also have one for commercial. And then once we developed that land curve and made adjustments to it, then we will look at other items in the land like neighborhood adjustments and delineated neighborhoods. Excuse me. So going through and analyzing the data, it was determined that for the land curve that we had here, that we would need a positive adjustment for the land curve of 10%. So this was applied to the base land curve, based off the sales. And you have all the sales that I sent you for all the different categories. And hopefully you've had a chance to review them. And you can see through them that they all meet the requirements of the statistics. So the land was set at the 10%. There was a residual land, which is basically like excess land, and that was at 7,500. That also, when looking at the sales over an acre or 2 acres, depending on the zoning, that the 10% applied for that. So the 7,500 was raised to 8,200. And then there was undevelopable land at $1,000. And that is wet, unusable, not even for access or really walking on. And that was at $1,000, and that was adjusted to $1,100.
Do what now? I'm sorry.
1,100.
1,100? Thank you.
All right, so once we set that and we reviewed the neighborhoods, there were 7 neighborhoods, 3 waterfronts, and there's 4 regular neighborhoods around the water. Neighborhood 1, 1A, 1B, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had to do the math myself. I said, I better write down the right number of neighborhoods.
Questions.
So, and that was really, when we looked around the lake, and we had the advantage of our team that was out there looking at the properties, did the inspections before for you a couple of years ago. So they were very familiar with the area, the lake. And so looking at that, we corrected a couple of things that were set up from the last time in regards to properties that might have been identified not or on water, but the majority of them were set up properly. A few corrections here or there. But the grading of a good for a one with a good location, good view, not too much blockage or anything like that, and then looking at the 1A where it was average with not quite as good a view, and then more of a 1B below average. We looked at those, made sure that they looked reasonable. Those categories seemed to be efficient in making sure that for this area, that the different types of effects with being on the water but not having greatest access or view and so forth seemed to apply pretty well, and also did with the sales that we had. So the next question was, because there were limited sales for 2022 after we qualified them, I went on and looked at 21 sales and qualified all of those, every single one of them that we had as sales. I looked through for MLS, and if they weren't qualified, we unqualified them. If they were qualified, then we looked at the MLS and made sure that they were accurate in their descriptions. What's nice about the MLS is they have like 45 pictures on each of these properties. So we took our time, looked at them, made sure that the grading was proper, the condition was proper, and that everything that was said on it was as up to date as possible.
Can I just take a second? I meant to actually ask you if you would do us the favor of, whenever you think it's a good point to stop and look back for questions, please do that. That way we can not lose them along the way. But continue, and wherever it's a natural stopping point, just say, questions. Please. For the board.
Okay, and then, so there were about 8 qualified sales for 2022, but 31 sales for the 3 years. So that did give us more of a sample. And which was reasonably consistent was, when we came up with the final, we have to be within 5% of the 95 for each subcategory. At this moment, based on looking at the sales and looking at the impact of what the values were and where they're going, that I think the ratio right now for the 8 sales is about 91 or 92%, so within the 3% of it. The ratio for the 3 years of sales, as the 23 starts to level off, a little bit more like the 22, was about 89%. So, challenging because there's about 470, 480 waterfront properties. That's not a terrible sample, but it's still somewhat of a small sample. So it was a lot of due diligence to make sure that they were consistent in how they were set up and that the coefficient dispersion for those 3 years was in the 8% range, which is pretty low, considering it's a 3-year period. And I didn't time adjust with them, although I considered time when I looked at them. And then for the, while the 8 sales were more in the 6.5% range for 22, which is well below the required 10%. So I'm going to continue on with what we've done, and then I think, as seemed to be a wise idea, talking to Chairman, was I'm going to then in the second page, once I'm done explaining everything, I'm going to go through some of the percent changes for land class, single-family condos, two-families, and so forth, by style, and then the change by each neighborhood from last year's values, percentage-wise, to this year's. So it's continuing on, after the land values have been set, the next step was to review and look at building costs based on the different styles. And the styles, colonials, capes, ranches, split levels, raised ranch, bungalows, all the various types of properties. And using Marshall and Swift, the cost manual support, and then testing with the sales, made adjustments to the building costs. On average, the building costs from last year were around $135 to $140. That's if there are no adjustments for unusual characteristics or grade and so forth. If you average cape or an average ranch, would be identified around that. After looking at the adjustments for construction and testing them to the sales, the 135 to 140, they were raised to around low 150s. So not a giant jump, but in 1 year, with values still somewhat moving up in general categories, there was about an 8 to 10% increase in the land building, in the building costs. So when we started our land contribution was about 35% of the total value. And the building contribution was around 65%. For this location, past 495, that is a reasonable land-to-building ratio. Just to identify, as I tend to value throughout the whole state, if you're closer to Boston, it's really like the land is like 55% and 45 building. As you move outside to the 128 area, it becomes around 45 to 47 to 55 and 53. As you come to 495, it becomes a little under at 40 or a little under it. As you go a little past that, you start to get between 35 and 40. By the time you get out to Pittsfield in that area, it's about 25. I think that makes sense because land is more available and it's more scarce near the city. So that is something that I know well because I've probably worked on about 100 communities in the Massachusetts area. So I've had good data to study and analyze. So another thing we do, because there's some sales, land sales, but not a lot, is using that land to building ratio as a test for reasonableness in the contribution of the land and the building to the total value. And that's another thing that we take into consideration when we're doing these values. Okay, and then another thing that we do is we test the depreciation schedule for reasonable depreciation. We have a schedule that adjusts for properties that are from poor condition all the way up to excellent condition. And we have a table that's consistent with the equitable changes as you adjust. Say a property built in 1950 might be average at 30%, 35% depreciation. As it gets renovated and so forth, it could be 20, 15. If it's not taken care of and has repairs needed, it could be dropped down to 40, 45, and so forth. So we have a consistent depreciation schedule that we use that's set up with the manual for making those adjustments when we do observations on each of the individual properties. We also have all the building permits that we look at for the properties that identify what changes there are. If we do not get into the property, then at least we know what's going on with the permits, renovations, remodeling, so adding a finished basement, those types of things. We updated and went through the outbuildings and extra features and took recent costs and matched them up, and also looked at ones we had just finished in Leominster and local areas for consistency. There's a lot of different types of extra features in outbuildings, so they were brought up to the local market here. Just checking everything off. Okay, so once that was done, we went in and made all these adjustments to the sales, got them within the ratios, made all the different calculations. Then we had all the sales done. Then we presented it to the board to review and to accept so that we could move the sales information into the main file, recalc the file with the new rates, check them one more time with the sales, recalc, check any error logs, and so forth, and then requested permission to put those rates in, recalc them, and then run all the record cards and go out and review the town for the physical characteristics like we did with the sales, and also to look at the sales close to in the neighborhoods, comparing those elements of condition, elements of construction, and elements of sales prices. Excuse me. And we got trends of what values were in different neighborhoods, and then made sure and looked at these properties to make sure that they were adjusted similarly, and that they were falling within the range that the sales indicated. Once that peer review process was done, we went and made all the changes to those properties, recalced them, checked the error logs, went through made sure if there were any overrides that were taken off, that they were all reflective of the rates. And then we started to do quality control on the properties, running reports, matching up that the neighborhood codes were proper, that there was consistency with the calculations, that there were no error of adjustments or building wasn't calculated. Went through all that to make sure that that was checked. That was a little tedious, but worth the time. And then make sure that they were set. Then we go through and we start to run what's called old to new values reports. So we can look for outliers. Oh, why did this one go up 75%? Well, there's a new building on it. So that's logical. We had one that went up like 12, 13 million, but it's a brand new big manufacturing warehouse type facility. And so that one jumped right out. So what's good about it is we'll run it and then we'll sort it by percentages. So we'll look at the negatives, we'll look at the positives. Because sometimes it's demolition of properties. The buildings are demolished and that will lower the value. So the assessor's office assisted us in going through those and reviewing them.
I'm just going to give you this one too.
Oh, okay.
2 and 3. Okay, good.
Now they can really hear me.
All right.
If they want to.
They want to.
Good. And then a lot of assistance with Rena, knowing the area well, and going through and checking things, and if there were questions, she had the records here, so she could go through and take a look at them and make sure that there were reasons for them. We found that we did have to pick up some properties that weren't fully picked up, or sketches that were in error. So we did about 20,
14.
50, but you did others earlier too.
Yes, that's true.
So there could have been about 25 or so.
Yeah.
As a whole, which is not terrible, but one isn't good, so you want to get them all picked up. So it was good that we caught those, and they were pretty obvious, where you have the house in front of you and it's like a diamond, right?
Yeah.
A couple of them. So one missed a turn. So we corrected that information and went through. So that when we were done, and it looked reasonable, I presented those values to you, 4, 5, 6 days ago, and you have been looking at them. And so now that that process is done, and then just so you're aware, for the commercials, so we'll talk about that too, there's about, with the exempts, mixed use, apartments, industrial, and commercial office retail, there's a lot of land, but there are probably 175 to 180 approved buildings. A lot of them is, the exempts, a lot of it's vacant land. But we went through all that land and made sure that it was consistent, like the other properties, the vacant land. They had the appropriate primary and then excess. If it was unbuildable, it had that code on it. If it was excess, it had that code on it. Commercials, we went, not that there were a lot of sales, but we got income and expense information, and we didn't get a lot, but the assessor, myself, and the Department of Revenue rep, Becky, we had access to a lot of information from external resources, CoStar and other information. We were able to get apartment rents, asking rents, and also, because I had just done all the work in Leominster, I was able to look at some of those rents and so forth that are bordering here, and looking at that information, and looking for consistency. And luckily, I do a lot of the communities around here, so I had their economic rents to look at comparing to what ours were. I found that some of them were close, some of them were low. And then Vacancy-wise, they were reasonable, but some of them needed to be adjusted. Expense ratios were reasonable, but some of them needed to be adjusted. Capitalization rates, looked at those through realty rates and band of investment, set up some new capitalization rates. So basically, as you know, you look at the income stream, you take away vacancy, you take away expenses for the property. It can be many expenses if it's a gross lease, meaning like an apartment and so forth, or if it's an industrial building, it might be a net lease where the expenses for the owner are less. Once you develop the net operating income, capitalize out that value, and then you go through, and when I value commercials, I do them one type at a time. So literally, no, but figuratively, I have 80 hats. And I'll put on my apartment hat, and then I'll put on my office hat, and then I'll put on my industrial hat. But that really is the most appropriate way. Actually, segment-wise, you can tell through this whole process that as I gave you things, they were in pieces. Condos, I gave you the waterfronts, and I gave you the 1 to 2, 3 families that weren't waterfront, and then I gave you the commercials, because I'm focusing on one type of property for equity and also fair market value. So went through, the difference now with the commercials are, you have to look at not just there's not a lot of market, but income and cost. So we've reconciled those two, the cost and so forth. And sometimes they'll reconcile clean. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes the income won't support the cost. Or the income might be a little higher than the cost. So we have adjustments for that called economic obsolescence, where the construction costs are what they are, but at this time, the income approach doesn't support those costs. But the income approach gives what the, present value of the property is with its present use. And that's what we're valuing. We're not going and saying, oh, you can put this on it. We're valuing what is there and how it reasonably affects the value of the property with its functionality. Excuse me. So now I've presented to you this morning, after a little work over the weekend, but we got it done.
As we all did.
As we all did. Yeah. I felt I wasn't alone. So with having those, you have the same review report I gave you for the residentials. You also have the tables for the costs, the market rents, vacancy and expenses, the capitalization rates. You have the neighborhood adjustments. You also have 2 other income reports. One of them is an income cost comparison report that shows the ratios just like you see on the sales. So we're kind of using the income like we use the sales for the residentials. That's your benchmark, and then we're adjusting the costs. The reason we use the cost for assessing, so we can identify all the elements of value: land, building, outbuildings, and extra features. So these adjustments were made and then reconciled so that that other approach, the income approach, and you don't, obviously if it's a 2,000 square foot small little commercial building, an income approach isn't appropriate. It's more of an owner-occupied type property, and I wouldn't want to apply an income approach to it, so we rely on the cost approach, because it would just, you'd have to inflate the income approach because it's not the appropriate approach. But I think there is about 158 properties. Don't quote me though. There's a large number of them.
Yes.
I can't quite remember all the numbers. Somewhere in that range that we did an income approach on.
Wednesday?
And now you'll also,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. I apologize. I didn't hear it.
what part did you not hear?
The last sentence. I'd like to be able to repeat it to you, but I didn't hear it.
That's fine.
There's the number of.
Yeah, so
Number-
not all the properties get an income approach because they might be small.
Okay.
Yeah, and owner occupied. But there is a large number of them. They'll be on another report. So you're going to have about close to 500 on the review, because all the land, it's all the exempts, and the exempts we don't do an income approach on. Whereas the income approach will have the primary income approach type of properties. And that will be a comparison of the cost. Like I said, that's similar to comparing for the sales. We have a ratio and so forth, but you're using the income approach as a supportive number for those types of properties that would use that value for determining a market value. The other one is called the economic spreadsheet, and this is a value per unit. So there'll be an income approach, and then it'll show you, if it's a office building, it'll be per square foot. If it's an apartment, it'll be per unit. So if you have, 10 properties and they're at a certain price, then it might be $75,000 a unit times the 10, and the total value is $750,000. What's nice about this report is you can look for consistency of equity per unit of measure. They're broken out by the types of properties. So when you go in there, you'll see all the apartments, and they'll be by units. You'll see the mobile home parks. You'll see the office. You'll see the retail. You'll see car service shops. And then you'll be able to look and say, oh, okay, here's industrial properties. Oh, geez, as low as $20 and as high as $75, $80. So you go and look at the 20, you're like, oh, I see why. It's older, it's worn out, and it needs a lot of work. You see the higher one, you'll be like, oh, that's a nice modern facility. So there's a good measure there of looking at the values by a unit of comparison. All right. So that is also how we did the commercials. I just want to make sure you're clear on that. Okay. And you understand the procedures that I did along with the procedures for the homes. I think for the homes, people are a little more familiar with it, where the commercial side, people aren't as familiar with it. And as you go through all of these, I'll be expecting, not just questions here, but any questions, you've had some already, and I've attempted to answer those, and I'll continue to answer all of them for you. And then as we go through the process with the Department of Revenue, she'll be asking both of us more questions. And she'll also be giving good advice. And we understand the guidelines. So once this is approved, we're going to go over the differences now, but once all this is approved, I've already started with a lot of the tables, and I've already sent her the sales for qualification coding to make sure they meet the state's requirements. Not final values yet, although I had her look at them anyways and run her statistical analysis. She said they met the guidelines, and she did find out of all the sales, 4 of them that she wanted us to make changes to. So what I do is I go through what they do, I take their macros and their process, and I do it. And then she had a couple that she felt should be a different code than we had, and I was fine with that. So now that part is done.
And that's built into the stuff we have now.
That's built into the stuff you have now. There may be 1 or 2 little small things, but very minimal. You'll be getting another set. When I send her the final set, I'm sending you all the final set of all the reports, so that you'll have everything. And I'll go through those again, so you're familiar with what we're presenting, so you'll know what she's looking for, because it's a rather large audit.
I noticed.
Yep.
But it'll be close to 100 documents.
There's going to be 100 files this time? I'm sorry.
So, well, are you through with the process thing? Could we jump in with some questions at this point?
You can, unless you want to wait till I go through the percentages.
I want to drop some questions on the process part, and we'll go back to
Okay,
the
you got it.
numbers after, if that's okay, because otherwise we're going to lose track of them.
My questions were actually on this old to new review
Oh, let's
about the
give you that in a
percents.
second then. Do you have questions on the process?
On the process. With regard to establishing the neighborhoods, and you indicated that there are, I'm trying to read my own writing here, but I think 7 different residential neighborhoods and
Yes.
3 or 4 lake?
3.
3, right. In each one of those, and now you have enough data to break out by each lake? Is that what, or are they still all
No,
merged
that-
together?
No.
No, we wouldn't be able to do that.
No.
But the
Yeah.
one thing good about it is they're somewhat reasonable. I think by using the 3 neighborhoods, it's been pretty good on adjusting all those. And the good news is I've worked closely with Nate Kramer, who went and did that analysis, and then we
Yeah.
went out and looked at all those properties again. And I've been contacting him back and forth with questions and so forth, just to make sure that we're on the right patterns with those. And then the other neighborhoods, you'll probably identify in the site index report I gave you, that you'll see that there are various price differences too. And that's tied to the locations of the properties being slightly inferior based on either a location or also housing stock, geographical area. And Sarah, I know that was some of the things that you had questioned.
Yeah, I appreciate that we have neighborhoods 2 through 5 and that we have the 1A, 1B. But I'm really hoping at some point for a map.
We are
So
going
we
to
can
do a
see
map.
those.
Yes, and check it,
Yeah,
but we couldn't do it
Until
until
we-
we finish the process.
yeah.
But that is a very good question, that once we get the map, we're going to review it again and check to make sure that there's none missing. Where as of now, we've done it through inspections and reports, but because of the pricing and costs and so forth and time, as soon as you accept everything, then we're going to ask them to run the map and then go over it again and go through it. We may have to run a second one, but use it as another check to
Yeah.
make sure they're consistent.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up to that one?
Sure. I
Um,
do have some, though. Don't drop me.
I won't,
Keep it
I
going,
won't.
Mark. Full circle.
I just, with those, I know we have our waterfront properties by good average and below average. And then we have the other neighborhoods 2 through 5, and those are based on sales, right? All of
Yeah.
those are based on sales.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's what our neighborhoods are based on, just clarifying,
Not just sales.
not just sales.
No.
It's also like things like
Building
roads.
characteristics, access,
roads, all of those are already-
geographical. Right.
Those are already incorporated in there. So, like, when I go to look at the card, I'm going to have a neighborhood code. Do we have an additional site index code?
The site index code is the neighborhood.
Okay, so it's the same. I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah,
knew how it was going to be listed on the
In the
card.
system, there's another neighborhood type
Yeah.
item, and I just matched them up.
Okay, so it's the same.
The system's very flexible. You can have like 6 different adjustments for neighborhood. Like when we're in Quincy or Boston, I use about all 6 of them.
But ours are just one and the same
I
on the
think it
card.
would be hard enough to use more than the reasonable 7.
I just wanted to know, so
Yeah.
when I look at the card, I know, oh, this is the neighborhood with the index
Right.
things considered already.
Yes, and in the variances aren't huge in the neighborhoods for like 2 through 5. They're basically within about 25% in range. So they're not that far apart. It's just a little nuance of a little higher value based on housing stock or maybe the amenities of the area.
Yeah, like you're near a busy road and you're not.
Right.
Stuff like that. Okay, thank you. That's what I was trying to figure out.
So I'm going to take a turn.
Sure.
You're on.
Is it fair to say that this revaluation does not depend on prior values? It really depends upon sales, and that we are using prior values merely for comparison's sake?
Yeah, starting point from where it was, even if it was flawed. I think you're going to see by the adjustment variances that we had, that some of those flawed areas have been corrected. And also, I always look at the sales for a whole year before and a whole year after for all the properties. Just for trends, just for surveys, and to see if my core set is sound. So I really was looking at more like 300 or 400 sales.
So where many people felt that the 23 values were flawed, they did not impact what you're coming up with right now as far as value.
Not as a contributory factor, no.
Correct.
It certainly impacted the differences.
Yeah.
Right, when we do the comparisons, it'll work, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have a second question, it's not related to that at all. We have some condos in town that are actually treated as rentals, and how do you treat the condos consistently for our valuations?
Yeah, so obviously the ones that are just condominiums, again, I looked at the 3 years, well, 1 year for the core, but then 3 years of sales, and then for that one, I actually got information on comparable other rental apartment complexes that are similar to it in use, and then did a income approach on it.
Oh, so you treated it as though it were an apartment?
Looking at it as an income approach and comparing the percentage change to all the condo complexes as a whole for comparison of percentages. That one I'm still not fully done with in the sense of, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about it, and I also wanted to talk to the DOR rep about it.
Yep.
She's familiar with this area, she's also been an assessor in this area, and I want to look at that, because there was a sale price purchase for it, and I have to reconcile that it's all owned by one and used as rentals, but could be sold as condos.
Right. The
So-
condo docs still exist.
It
but-
does.
Yes, it does.
It does.
Yes.
So that's that is a tricky one.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, the ones that are being treated like rentals, you're doing the income approach on?
Or just that one, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
And that's what you're going back and forth about?
Right, because I have to still consider it as purchasable individually. So, and those usually sell for more than if you were to rent them.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks. I know
Yep.
you said that, I just wanted to make sure I had it right.
You know, that one is a little tricky. You had a few of the commercials that, went through, but anything that was out of the ordinary, I just gathered more research on. And then I'll just have to also use that final approach to value, which is common sense, too, when we look at things like this that are more unique. But there was good data in a lot of areas for apartments. I had a lot of the rents from the marketplace for the bigger ones, and then I could compare those to that as a guide.
Thank you. And did you have a follow-up on something?
I'm sure we can go around a few times,
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, just building on the condos piece,
We're still, we're not done the percentages yet. We're going to talk about the process, right?
we're talking about the process. Okay, yes,
I
yes.
just noticed you were holding the numbers.
No, those are what jumped out at me and prompted the question, that's all.
Thank you.
With regard to the
Condominium?
condominiums, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm really tired. He's
okay.
really tired, we're all tired. Okay, so there are differences, significant differences with regard to the neighborhood, and I believe the price, some of them have, 300 in that, and I believe that's what you're just talking about, but there are also some other areas in town. Are you treating each one of those as a different neighborhood?
They're
So-
not neighborhoods, they're complexes, condos.
Yeah, but there's two or three, they're over 60 acres, one of them. There's another one that's sitting down with your little place, maybe there's 5 acres, and there's more residents there. How are you breaking them out? Are you treating all the others except that one with the 5 acres I just described as one? Or how are you doing
No,
that?
they're all condominiums, so they're docks.
Yeah.
So there are a certain amount of units for each one.
Yeah,
So each one of them is recorded, and then they're looked at through the sales of each of them, and then compared as a whole, just for what the trends are, but they're valued individually.
okay.
Like, say one complex has 20, one has 8, then we look at the sales for the 20, we look for the one for the 8, and we specify it. They're a little bit of an island of their own.
Yes.
And then we make adjustments based on that sales data for each of the complexes.
Okay.
If they don't have any sales, I'll go look for complexes that are somewhat similar. So if there's one with 6 units and it's got this much land to support it, I'll try to use that as a guide.
Okay.
And that's why, if you notice, when I sent those to you, I think I identified the sales on there, so you
Right.
could see what they were. And I didn't just identify 22 sales, I believe I identified 21 and 23. So you could see currently the trend for, maybe there were 10, but there were 3 sales.
Right.
And you could see a pattern.
Now, do you apply a seasonality to the factor, any of those factors? Because I noticed, if you know, or I've noticed that if you try and sell your house in May, June, July, it'll go for a higher value than it would January.
Yeah, I
And-
look at date as a
Your
consideration.
sale?
Sale
And you
date.
factor that?
So did you see that in there? I did a quartile by date. I sent that to you.
Okay, I didn't see that. My own little scratching.
Well, I don't know why. I only sent you about 40 documents.
No, at least.
Way more than that.
I know, but
stopped
in one
counting,
time.
really.
At one time, yes,
Back to
thank
that.
you.
I think I need to replace the drum on my printer.
Sorry.
That's why I sent it to you in sections.
Baseline.
I feel I did them, at least, that's how I do it too. You have to do it in sections.
Can't do it all at once.
Right. If I could, Mr. Chairman, another?
Yeah, well,
Okay, with regard to process, you made a considerable number of changes. Were there any that jumped out at you as common that we need to start looking for ourselves to see when, if we make, we're going to be always adding data, where's the most common place that you make a mistake, or you found? No
Where we make
picture?
a mistake. Well, we try to minimize our mistakes through the process that I just described to you.
Mhm.
That's by all the components of the things that I told you I did.
Yeah.
The error log is looking for mistakes, checking the overrides, checking for details within each of the spreadsheets, sorting them certain ways, checking to make sure all the building values calculate. That's how we find all the mistakes.
So roughly, what was the percentage on the number of mistakes to the cards that you actually reviewed?
Well, that's different. The cards were, some were mistakes, some were just updating information, and some were adding things that weren't there or deleting things that weren't there. So what percentage of the 4,000 cards or so that we looked at, that we had to make adjustments for?
Yep.
And some of them, I'm not identifying any of them as mistakes. There could be things that were missing or whatever, but
Sure.
I'd say probably about 800 or 900.
800 or 900 of the
Change-
four.
changes.
Changes.
4,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's about 20%? 20% or
But you
so.
got to realize that significant mistake errors like data entry and things like we did was a very small number. It couldn't have been more than 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were the significant. I probably found 10 or 15 that in your system, when you convert it, you have a little market adjustment factor in there. If it is 0, you don't get any value.
It doesn't calculate.
Oh, multiplied by 0, you get
Yeah.
a really easy answer, yeah.
So, again, there were 15 of those, but they're pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So, again, everything's in a spreadsheet, and you saw how big that spreadsheet was. So there's an adjustment for that, so I went in and looked for all of those. And then again, the easiest thing to do is just run every improvement and see if they don't have a building value.
Okay.
There's also UCs that were put in by mistake at 0 instead of 50% or 75. And that's, I'm not saying that's because it's Lunenburg, this stuff happens in every job we do. So we have a script of all these different things that we do and look for to cleanse the data.
Mike, if we could, one more, just final, as part of that question. Okay, the state has guidelines with regard to the activities you have to engage in if you have to change more than 10% of your property cards and update those?
No, that's only after disclosure, higher than a 10% change, and they want to report on it.
Okay,
That's after disclosure.
so that's our out.
Yeah, that's good, though, that you knew that. That's a
I
pretty
read too
detailed
much. Yeah.
item. Yeah, so what happens, once we're done and then the state's done, then you'll have disclosure. And this is where you put the properties out for people to look at
Yeah.
and examine. I think this lady was asking about that, when would the public get to see it and so forth. So that would be probably in a 2 to 2.5 weeks, depending on how long this process
We'll be
is.
discussing its disclosure later. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's, when the disclosure comes, then we make all the changes, but we keep a log. Anything that's higher than a 10% adjustment, the state wants to see a report on that.
Right.
Right.
Good catch.
Cool. I think we can move into the numbers at this point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, these are based on the unabated values, right?
So just to be, you can ask that question right now.
The percents for the old to new review values are based on the unabated values, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it might come out a little different.
We're going to have to do the
Yeah, we're gonna have to
analysis
do that.
to marry the abated numbers to these to see what the changes would be for a particular grouping. Right now, we're just going to be doing the comparison against the 23 values.
Yeah, for the
Because that's what Mike had access to.
Yeah, and we'll do that other part.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
that's good words. I love it when people do that. Save my voice. Exactly true. So when we look at old to news, we can only look at what's calculated in your system has been saved as a historical number. And then there are abatements afterwards. And in this case, you had a fair number of them. So which changed the process of people looking at it, that they got an abatement and consider that their final value. And then using that as a guideline for their next value. So that data, I couldn't go there because it wasn't in the system. So what we're comparing is what the final value was presented out to the people last year before abatements.
Right.
All right, so that's one of the reasons why you're going to see a large variance of ratios. So if we look at the bottom of the first page, as a whole, the community went up 6%. But that's really where the similarities kind of end.
I believe that.
Yeah,
Although I have to say that that's not completely true at all, because the residential styles aren't extremely off. The reason why some of them are lower is the ones that are by the waterfront. And because they were so high before, and they're not going to be as high now based on those numbers, based on the data that I looked at, they're going to come down. So the single family, so the whole was 6%. Single families, which are all the properties, including waterfront and non-waterfront, went up about 4%. The condominiums went up a lot. They were really strong values, and they went up 30%. Now, again, the condominiums have a smaller dollar amount, some of them, than maybe the homes were, but still, it was a pretty big increase. And there was, multiple sales to support that. Two families, they went up 9%, a few percentage points above the average. There's not a lot of them here. If you can get a two-family, it's desirable. So I can see why they would go up and be a little higher number. Multi-homes, that's two homes on a property. Not a lot of those, but is a category. That went up 3%, so that was fairly close to the single-family number. Apartments, again, there's only 10 or 12 in the whole community, but they were undervalued.
10 or 12 buildings, there are a lot of units.
Yeah, 10 or 12 buildings. 10 or 12 parcels.
Parcels,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, they have a lot of units to
speak.
them.
Right.
So that went up like the,
condos.
yeah, that went up like the condos. That went up 30%. And vacant land, as you know, went up 10%. Some of them may not go up as much, depending on if things had changed with them, or any other adjustments were made since then. Taking some land out, moving some land in, those types of things. Physical changes. Commercials, they were up 6%, pretty similar to the town average. Industrials also up 6%. They were pretty good, actually, in the sense that it's just that some of them didn't have income approaches to them. I had to add about 20 or 30 income approaches. So I solidified things a little bit more for defense of value and support of value. And then I went through and made them consistent. I think you'll find when you go through that economic income spreadsheet and look at the units of comparison, you're going to see when the ones that are together in a higher one will be of a little higher quality. You see a few that are in the lower, there'll be a little bit of a lower quality. Made a lot of consistency to it. Did have to put in, for the 500 properties, it's probably 40 or 50 of them that have economic obsolescence. Sometimes not a lot, 5, 10%, so forth, but want to put true costs in, but some of them were not supportive of that. And some of that had to do with condition too. They just weren't renting as high. And there were some vacancies too. So that's why you'll see next to them income adjustment type thing, because there'll be something in the income approach that needed to be adjusted that also needed to be reflective in the cost approach, because the thing is the process of reconciliation. It's an appraisal term, it's used in reports and so forth, and this is what it is. A stronger supportive value is indicating something needs to be adjusted in the depreciation. And then industrial, 6% also, and mixed use, 7%. So they're pretty tight. So there are actually a lot of categories that are pretty close to the average. We'll do the styles and we'll do the neighborhoods last. So the styles, ranches, 2% up, conventionals, 1%, colonials, -1%. A lot of them are waterfronts. Capes, 3%, cottages, a lot of them are waterfronts, down 7%. Contemporaries, flat. Raised ranch, 4%. Garrisons, there's not too many of them. It's 10%, but there's not that many of them. And split level, 4%. So again, from the 4% increase, 6% increase, they're hovering around that, other than the cottages. And again, cottages are a small dollar amount in a lot of cases, so 7%, number-wise, it's a percentage, but number-wise, it's a little smaller than like a big colonial or something. Then the last, which is, again, to clarify, based on pre-abatement numbers, the neighborhoods, for neighborhood 1 down 9%, neighborhood 1A down 25%. Now, also, I think that that's also because for 1A and 1B, they didn't exist before, then they were brought in and adjusted so that they were brought down maybe more than some of the ones that were 1s, and then they had the effects of also the market bringing it down, so that had like a double effect on it. So some of that was adjusted, I think, and probably put into the rates that I had, and then, but not exact to the abatements, which was identified earlier. So that's why those two are so significant. And then the others, at the 8, 9, 9, and 6, which are pretty consistent with how they were before, are pretty close to the 6% and are very consistent. So there's a lot of very consistent, and then there's a lot of not so consistent. But I do believe that the market supports those adjustments, and they're equitable in the numbers, in the consistency, in the assessment ratios, and the CODs, in the investigation of it physically, auditing, going through as much. Once we get that map, we'll clean it up again. It's just I didn't want to pay for the map until we were,
That's a lot of work.
until we exhausted all the other ways of comparing, and then we could have the visual. So where we're at right now is you now have all the values. You have all the reports, and I am starting to put together reports for her, but they're tables and so forth. They're not value reports. I want to be ready and get it done as quick as possible and be ready for you. So my supportive documental items like building cost reports and land reports and outbuilding reports and all these other reports, I've got a folder and I started working on those today. So I'm pretty caught up with most of the stuff. I got a few more things I can do. But now it's just a matter of you guys going through and identifying things and offering more questions to me as you look at them.
Any further questions for Mike?
No, mine were about that. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Mr. Abbott?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mike. Excuse me, Mike. Is it
Michael?
Michael's good, okay,
Actually,
good.
my mother
These are-
calls me
these are-
Mother, yeah.
These are what they call back pocket calculations, and I just got the reports and doing
For
things.
my next trick.
Yeah. Hey, so if I have about 4,400 residential homes in town, and I kind of broke them out without doing official counts and things like that, I just did a quick sort. I came up with, and the reason why I'm asking is, how does this feel in terms of, about 12% of them were below the, below 10%. I mean,
Below
12%, 12% of them actually had decreased values. Sorry, I'm really, really tired. But anyway, 12% were below the prior number, meaning they had a negative number.
Lower than the 23 value.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, all right. Thank you, I'm sorry. Okay, and I noticed that basically 20% of the population was greater than 10% of an increase in the population. That would kind of fit with your 6% look. I'm looking at abatements, and I'm looking about the workload and what we might end up abating. Is it your experience when somebody gets a 20% increase in valuation, are they going to be on our doorstep looking for an abatement and a pile of explanations?
Really depends on the support you have for it and what type of property it is.
Yeah.
So that's why I went through the detail of the different percentages so that you could see, and I explained why they were that way. So I have pretty good data on anything that was a higher percentage.
So there would be 800 people or so that are kind of interested in why their property values went up more than 10%.
Well, a lot of them too might be work that was done on them,
Yeah.
because you have a lot of, permits.
Right.
You had a lot of new construction, you had a lot of additions, renovations, a lot.
A lot.
And so that will be a lot of them. That's why Rena and I had gone through them to make sure there was support for the ones that had higher percentages.
Right.
The
I'm just trying to-
condos
I'm sorry.
had sales that supported, there's a lot of condos in there.
I just wanted to create a recognition that this could be another, not necessarily tsunami of dollars going out of the town, but the workload that's going to hit our assessor's office could be kind of significant. It won't be just 400. It could be, 400 last wave. This could be greater. And so.
Well, the data is the data.
So the
Nothing
question.
you can do about it, but be as detailed as you can, as accurate as you can,
Right.
and as thorough as you can, and be open to showing them how it was developed.
Right. One of the things we've been striving for is transparency and communication. So that's what we're trying to do. Get
why
it
we're
out in
here.
front of people, let them know ahead of time what's happening, so they don't feel victimized at the end. Nobody likes that. Nobody liked it last year.
No, but there's been a lot of effort to have everyone that's involved in it, that are professionals, look at everything as much as possible.
Take it down.
And do the steps that you requested to have done through a full inspection, through a full audit, through a full analysis, through a full cleanup of errors and mistakes, and to investigate qualified sales, all the building blocks to a reasonable assessment.
Okay. Any more board questions from Rena?
Could I just ask Mike a question? Mike, this morning there was a woman, she came into the office and she was wondering how we're going to put this data out there. And I said, the website, obviously. And she said, well, there's a lot of seniors that don't know how to use computers and stuff. So I told her what I've done in the past is I run a street listing.
Yeah.
In, with the new values in it. No names, just the street listing. And I told her, I said, I will probably put one of those at the library.
Yeah, library's good, here's good. Senior
down-
center, if you have one.
In the senior center and down in the front hall, in case somebody comes in.
Yeah.
Do you have any other suggestions?
Well, sometimes they're done by map, block, and lot. I won't say owner if you don't want the owners, but you can do it by owner name too. It is public information.
Right.
And by address. So we have a standard book for all three of those.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, we'll be talking about our strategy for the disclosure process in a little bit, so that's a perfect question for lead-in for that. Anything left for Mike from up here? Thank you, Mike. Now, I had proposed that maybe we would have to have a second meeting to follow up on the commercials and all the other stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I don't know if we need it now, and maybe we should talk about that before we invite Mike back for that.
It's however you want to do it. If you want me to do, you could do a public Zoom one, right, too?
We could do Zoom.
Yeah.
If we
I
so
could do
chose.
that, or I could come back again. Why don't you see how many you got, and do what we did before, send them to me.
Yeah.
And then I'll go through and I'll answer what I can. If you feel that some of them need to be face-to-face, we'll do another meeting. If I can, explain it thoroughly to you, then whatever you need.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Been very flexible with us, thank you.
I understand. I've been through these with other communities at times, and I understand, so we've been really trying to be as thorough as possible.
Thank you.
I can't say I'm 100% perfect, but I do know a 95 is an A, so we'll shoot for somewhere between 95 and 100.
Unless you're the victim of the wrong question, yeah. Okay.
There's always
I
that
just have
darn
to say,
human
Michael,
element.
Thank you so much. You've put us in a really good position in terms of having knowledge that we can speak to when we meet with the residents and saying, this is the data. And if you can find something else where it's wrong, tell us. But at least we have that. We have a good, solid base this time, right, Rena?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that one thing that I think the public needs to know, and that you guys, I'm sure, know, Rena knows, is that the appraisal process, especially mass appraisal, the public is part of the appraisal
Right.
process. They're part of the valuation process. No one knows their property better than they do. So we research, we look at, we get building permits, we get all these things, MLS and all this information, CoStar, but the disclosure is a good time for them to look at things and make comments and say, did you know I had an easement? Did you know that I had water here? And things you might not know. It's been a year. And the weather's kind of crazy all the time, so who knows?
Yep.
Look at Leominster.
No flooding here, please.
Yeah, you're in high ground. So I think that we do want to make sure we get everything out to them, we explain it to them, and that they're open for review and constructive comments.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? We're going to thank you very much and send you on your way.
Oh, we'll go.
You get home at a reasonable hour. Unusual, isn't it?
Well, I know I'll be talking to Mike.
Yeah, well, there'll be some stuff going on.
No problem. It was a pleasure. It
probably
has
will
been a
have
pleasure
questions.
working with you and to continue to work with you.
And when we get to the disclosure period, we may actually be reaching out to you with questions as well.
Sure.
Because there's going to be a lot going on then as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. We're going to move,
Mr. Chairman,
Just a buyer break?
Oh,
I'm sorry, there was a question up on the, didn't hear you, sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Dave Rogers, 82 Highland Street.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, before Mike leaves, I wonder, if we could ask a few questions, and it might possibly, be aligned with the kind of decisions that you make.
Well, the intention of this was to be a working session between Mike and the board.
Okay, that's fine.
I can make a suggestion.
Go ahead.
If you want to have them compile all their questions, then we can do it as part of the next working thing that we're going to do. When you send me questions and so forth, I want to get as many questions from them, so, because they have good perspective.
Yep.
You brought up some good questions, so,
You-
but I think the forum-wise, we don't know what the questions are going to be, so it would be good if they could present them to you in writing or something, and then I will review them.
So I don't know if you were here for the beginning of the meeting, Dave.
I wasn't.
We had asked that if people had questions, they would write them down, get them to us. You can send them to me directly if you'd like, and at my Lunenburg.gov, or LunenburgMass.gov account. And I will make sure they get into Mike's hands, and we can get answers back probably more quickly.
That's perfect.
So
Perfect.
thank you very much
And
for
I
the suggestion.
apologize.
No, I appreciate the suggestion, and not everybody
I
can
wasn't,
be here for every moment of the
wasn't
meeting.
around when the meeting started. Karen had me doing errands. Gee whiz.
Karen-
So, anyway,
We can relate.
I'll do that for you,
Thank you very much, David.
Ross. Thank you. Yep.
Are there any other folks on the phone that wanted to? Seeing none, we'll move on. Oh, since we're running the agenda in reverse, and we're going to take a brief pause because one of our members had to excuse himself for a moment. But we will be talking about the public disclosure notice and impact notice for the second homeowners. We will be talking about the strategy that we're going to use for how we're going to communicate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And what the timing is. No, that's okay. Just give us all 1 minute. 1 minute? Oh, come on up. So we talked about there will be a Department of Revenue review and preliminary certification. That certification is supposed to be done by February 21st. After that, we will be entering the public disclosure notice period. That period is right now scheduled for on or about February 26th through March 4th. It is mandated to be a 5-business-day review, where all the homeowners can take a look at all of the data and feedback those things that need be fixed. The purpose is to inform the taxpayers about the assessment process and to give an opportunity to review and ask questions, discuss and request changes to the proposed values during the public disclosure period. An informed taxpayer can alert the assessor of inadvertent data inaccuracies preventing unnecessary abatements and undue burden in the overlay account. I mentioned the information will be from February 26th through the 4th. The information will be posted at the Lunenburg website during that period of time. We also, I think we should investigate, we'll be talking about the process, investigate how else we can communicate that, be it through the local newspapers, or if it needs to be just posted in the library, et cetera, et cetera. We'll go through that. We will provide an overview of the process, the valuation changes and overall effect on assessments. We will include a statement that we have received preliminary certification from the Mass DOR, which will have occurred on the 21st. The location and manner by which taxpayers can obtain proposed values. The dates and times that the assessor's office will be open, and we just heard earlier that the assessor's office may be open at least longer in the day, thankfully. For taxpayers to ask questions, review and discuss, and request changes in proposed values. We will also include a statement to contact the assessor's office during public disclosure period to ask questions, review, discuss, and request changes in the proposed values. The classification hearing that the select board will be taking with the select board will be on, I believe it's March 12th. That's the Tuesday. And from there, trying to get tax bills out by the end of March. And then, at that point, what if there's an abatement request, that abatement process would start thereafter. So I want to get that out there for everybody, so I don't know if there's anything else anybody needed to add. So we should, the point of having this on here was to make sure that this was available, but that we also talked about what strategies we might use for the communication with the taxpayers.
Right.
So if you have something new, something else, something we haven't talked about?
Aside from the website, Mr. Chairman, that I believe is going to try and be our core methodology of allowing our citizens to understand what we're attempting to do. It's massive. There's a lot of pieces. It will not be complete by March 15th, but there'll be.
The website.
The website. But, yeah.
Please be careful.
No.
It leaves things open for interpretation.
Right.
so.
Websites are never finished.
They're never, it's true, that's
Always
true, there's always something changing. And but we will get the critical pieces out, and we believe we have one conference set up at the senior center, with the seniors on the 25th of March, I believe, is that the 25th?
I think it's the 25th.
It's the 25th, and we're going to try and see what else we can set up. It's a scramble for the website, and Kara is doing a great job. Heather, thank you very much for her assistance. Thank you. Seriously, thank you.
We may need a little extra of her time to make sure that we get that posted on time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And she's only here 2 days a week, that's our problem. And she's got a lot, she's able to do it. Yeah. Thank you.
So for those people in the online, we got reassurance from the town manager that we will be able to get this stuff out onto the website, I believe. Okay.
Well, you went for the close on that one.
Well, I just want to make sure that we know what the real conclusion is. Plus, no one could, not at a microphone.
Right.
So, sorry. Didn't mean to interpret for you. Did anybody else want to talk about anything else around the disclosure period? Any other really creative ideas for communicating disclosure? I know one. Go ahead.
When Becky was out last week, I think, she came out and spent some time with me and Brian.
DOR.
So Becky is the DOR rep for us.
Oh, okay, our DOR rep. And I had actually talked to Brian about this a while ago. Years ago, before we had all these websites, we used to do these visual boards. And Becky was talking to us about it, and she said, I know it's old school, but it's still great to have a visual board. And I started actually working on that today, taking all the sales of the property, and I'm going to put the houses on a board, what they sold for, what they're assessed at, and what they sold for. Just, and put those up maybe in the front hallway so people can come in and just look at, I have a colonial house. Oh, wow, my house looks like that, and that's sold for that much. It's just a visual thing that Becky suggested, and I told her I used to always do that in Groton, so it's something we're going to do, because it's nice visual effect as well.
It's a sales wall, and I think it actually would travel well. We could actually put some up at the library, we
Yeah.
could put some up at the senior center. So that's an excellent idea, and I'm glad you reminded me of that.
I'm done.
Well, I'll be updating how to read your card.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How to read your vision card. So those of you who see your vision card will know how to use it. We have Sarah graciously volunteered. Did you volunteer?
I think I did, when I signed up here.
To create a little thing you can walk through and figure out what's on your vision card and what it means, where you can find it. So, thank you.
Yeah, job
And,
sites.
and Mr. Rabbit has volunteered to push the website, so thank you.
I'm
just-
using your
I'm just-
your document already, sir. Thank you.
I'm not done with
You're
it.
not done with it. There's some numbers in there yet, but the rest of it's good explanations. They're good explanations.
Unless there's anything else further on that, I think we should move on to, or back to, the approved recommendation for the 2025 overlay. I know that Mr. Rabbit has done some research, and I know that the town manager has provided us with some information as well, so would you like to go ahead?
Sure.
Please.
The folks are they gonna put them up? Did they
Oh.
leave?
No, they're back there.
They're back there?
If you could just notify them in the
Yeah.
control room, could you put up those, you don't have to go anywhere.
I was gonna just stand up and say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm gonna stand up.
Thank you.
Is it up?
Yeah, it's probably over there. Is it on this screen?
No, that's not.
It's not anywhere.
Nothing there?
No,
It's not on.
It's not on the
I'm
Zoom
gonna have
either.
to go
oh,
down
it
just
it
to.
is on the Zoom now.
It's on the Zoom?
It's on the Zoom?
Yeah.
Is it on, anything you guys can see?
We can't share it on Zoom.
No, can you share it there? It's not there.
Share up here?
Oh, that TV's off. Oh, I turned off.
Wow. First check the plug, then check if it's on or off. I could be IT.
I can't see that, can you?
No, but he's
So it
putting it.
won't be up there.
No, it'll be there.
Yeah,
You'll have
so
them here.
I'll have it here, but I don't.
You can just
know-
tell them when to change this.
I don't know, I won't know what slide he's on when I tell him to change, so sometimes they change faster than others.
You don't tell them when to change. Just tell them when to
I'm
change.
going down there.
Oh, wait a minute. He's like a week and a half older than I am.
I now have progressive.
Give us a minute. We said we wouldn't delay for technology, but we will.
Okay, was volunteered, or volunteered, in any case, to look at the whole overlay process, the abatement process it's kind of linked into, caused me to go off, you go to the second slide, and I went and pulled up the, what is DOR requiring that we, how we perform? And it says cities, towns, and tax levy improvement districts must maintain an adequate balance in the overlay account to fund anticipated property disbursements, exemptions, receivables, exposure for all fiscal years. As part of the annual budget, the assessors must analyze the balance of the overlay account and determine whether it is adequate to fund anticipated property abatements, exemptions, and receivables during the upcoming fiscal year to the existing abatement and exemption and receivable exposure of the town. So you got to look, you can't just look back and steer the boat by the wake. You got to be looking forward so you avoid hitting icebergs, as we did in the past. Okay, just some quick data. And I put this up just so you can understand what direction the town is going. In December of 2023, we sold, in December 2020, homes were up 16% from the prior year. The values went up. Median sales went to 485. The Lunenburg is considered a very, very competitive market. 95% of the homes, 99.5% of the homes were sold within 1% of the listing. So when they give you an assessment, when they put it up for sale, they pretty much sell it at the prices that they've got. So when people run out and go and get an assessment on their property, it might be pretty darn close, and we've got to pay attention to that. On average, 2023, they sold in 30 days. There were 32 homes sold in the month of December alone. And we need to anticipate that change in assessed values will be a surprise for a number of homeowners. And as we'd indicated with Mike, that is probably 20% of the whole population is going up more than 10% in change, with regard to change. Not your tax dollars or anything, just the total change. And I've included some charts. If you can go to the charts. Okay. So in your slides. Yeah, no, go back. The slides didn't make it into the folders? Okay. So anyway, if you had your house over 5 years.
Is the one that
you've
looks
had-
like this?
What's that?
Is the one that looks like that?
Yeah, I've got it, but apparently it didn't make it my stuff. Essentially, you've made a ton of money in a very short period of time. And that should be measured against what you saw in terms of...
Sorry, Jack? Jack, could you speak into the microphone? Because
Oh,
those
yeah.
people out there
Okay,
won't
sorry.
know.
Good point. Okay, so anyway, I will make these charts available to you, but essentially it says that in the last year alone, if you had your house for sale back in December, you probably were selling it for around $300, $350, and now you can probably sell it close to $5. And that's what the charts are saying. In the long term, we are excelling, going faster than the normal house rates go in the area. Okay, go to the next chart, since we can't see them anyway. Okay, I've put together a little bit of an outline of what DOR is saying, and okay, I'm going to use this document called the OL1 overlay, and is that there?
Is that it?
No.
This is charts.
Oh, now I see.
I just
Your
hit
charts are
spot-
back.
I just hit spotlight for everyone.
Go ahead.
We'll keep going forward?
Keep going forward. Yeah.
No.
Anyway, yes, the value of your house, you kept up.
Yeah, go to the mic when you talk about that. No.
No, just,
Just lift that up and carry it around?
Oh, you want to try to carry it?
Okay, with regard to the levy choices, you've got a pile of them in terms of what we're allowed to do. And Heather has put together, Heather, I think you were the one that put some of the initial numbers down, or did the DOR do that? I don't know. Okay, with regard to the OL1 document? That's theirs?
comes right off Gateway.
That's for Gateway? So that's okay. But Gateway, they require that we try to look at basically 5 years of what was the average abatement given. And unfortunately, we had an event, we hit the iceberg, and it really kind of dramatically changed our average over the past 5 years. Normally, you go maybe 130,000 per year in abatements, and last year we went 1.4 million. That kind of skews your pieces up. The other thing was that these are averages of an average. It's never a really good way to do it, but it gives you an idea. So what had happened is we put together, or DOR or whoever, put together an OL1 overlay. And what it's saying is that we should essentially put a lot more money in our overlay account than what they would normally see in a 5-year period. But they provide us with some guidelines and some outs, because that might push it. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm seeing it over here now, huh? Okay. Here we go. Okay, so the first one is, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. they've given us the document, and they also, with the document, they gave us an entire series of warnings that we're not putting enough money away right now. Next slide, please.
Well, that's not exactly what that says, Jack.
Oh, no. What's that?
That's inaccurate.
This slide?
This statement.
The statement that,
001 statement is inaccurate.
no,
No.
the way you interpreted it was,
Yeah.
Okay, if I was supposed to be doing a 5-year average, they would come up, they were indicating that the average would be $392,000, right?
correct, with that really large year we had last year.
Very large chunk in there. And generally, they say you have to use the 5 years, but there's a whole series of guidelines that allow us to say, no, we don't have to. Commissioner must determine the overlay account balance is reasonable, adequate to cover the anticipated abatements and exemptions. And their number saying something like now has to be able to accommodate and end up with 403,000? Is that, Heather, is that correct? This is all new to me,
No,
but
no, that's,
the overlay balance needed, line 7, says that they're supposed to have 403. The reasonableness of the account balance will be judged based on the following factors. The balance at the end of June 30th, the abatements and exemptions granted made for prior fiscal year, July 1, the average granted abatements and exemptions. Oh, thank you. The average of a granted abatements and exemptions, outstanding receivables for the 5 previous years. And there's an out clause for us, and says that other significant factors should be known to the commission. This is an outlier? You can add stuff for me, Heather, whatever you want. Go for it.
so,
Sorry.
Go ahead,
Mr. Chair?
please.
I just want to make sure, because this is, I don't want people to have misinformation.
Right, that's
as well.
right.
That's something I think,
We're trying to minimize.
right. So what that is, the OL is set, the overlay form that's submitted through DOR Gateway's submission, is that 392 is the 5-year average given the abatements that were granted from fiscal 19 to fiscal 23, which included the additional 1.5 million that was added to the overlay, and that year in fiscal 23, that number was $1,451,502. So that's what that 5-year average, that 392, is. The 403 that you're indicating is the amount of abatements that were granted in fiscal 24, and that average number combined. But what you're not taking into account is all the years, every year that amount is appropriated into the overlay is a combination, a cumulative effect of what's available in the overlay to address abatements and exemptions.
Right. In fact, if you run out of money, you're supposed to first drain that account and then go find money other places. Is that correct?
What?
So,
Run out of money?
If you're, okay, you
I don't-
ran a $1.4 million abatement in that 1 year.
You would have to raise that in the recap in the fall.
Following year?
Right.
Before the tax rate is set. If there's a deficit
Right.
in the overlay account, you raise it on the recap in the fall.
Okay, so,
line 8 says the overlay balance available in excess of the overlay balance needed is showing a positive balance.
Right.
Right.
We're not sure.
Even with those numbers. Right.
And what I want to, before we get any further down this path,
Sure.
I've already reached out to DOR about our anomaly year last year. They said that that could be excluded in the 5-year average. So if you look at the combination, for excluding that large amount and what the original overlay amount was on the fiscal 23 recap, it was 116, and a 5-year average would be around 125,000.
Right.
yeah, right. And we did that. That was our option number 2. Option number 1 was, okay, we'll take your number because you've given us a whole pile of nasty warnings at the top that we didn't have enough number.
So-
But I think it was a computer-generated response.
Go ahead.
Is that fair?
The-
The warnings?
Yeah, I think the way you read this, you misread it. It was not really a warning that we were in trouble.
It's got a big
I-
litigation symbol on it, Brian.
get
This
it,
is tax
but-
rate recap, page 2 of the allowance for abatements and exemptions overlay.
But it was clearly dependent upon that, no, it was clearly driven by that one-year anomaly.
And that allowed us the exemptions.
So if we
Since
t-
option 1 was,
I don't know.
just go ahead and pay it.
What's your option?
I have
We don't know what your
four-
options
I
are.
have 4 different options coming up.
Okay.
Okay, 4 different options coming up. And I'm suggesting and I did, if you look at some of the worksheets that I attached, I did come up with something similar. I also took the trend line in terms of how it looked like it had increased a little bit, and I threw a touch more on there. And I was saying, $140,000, $150,000, because we've got another abatement routine going through, and we are potentially causing another round of abatements above the past normal, which was the 120, 130. So, okay, throw something on there and be conservative with that. And that was my second option, to go in there. And then the more I thought about it, I said, maybe you'll kick it up to 200 because we don't want to run out. But at the same time, I also understand that we're in a tough financial position right now, because it looks like, if you look at the other exemptions and such, or the future is coming through, that we're not having the same revenue stream. And I'll get to that in a second if I could, but
I think that's entirely unrelated to, if you're talking about receivables, that's entirely unrelated, and that,
receivables? No, if you look, okay, you've already gone through the packet, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so you thought that the list of potential receivables that all went down?
those are estimates.
Pardon?
Those are estimates. You're going off estimates that are in Gateway.
Estimates, right. But you were estimating revenues coming into town down quite a bit.
That's against actuals, and we do that as part of the budget process.
Right.
That's what allowed the town to actually fund the overlay last year.
Right.
And not end up in a
So-
bigger crisis than we were.
I guess the question was, why would you estimate them lower? But I'll get to that. I'll tell you what, I'll go
I think
through-
that's outside the
I don't-
purview of the overlay.
Well, I
Sorry,
don't
Mr.
look
Chair.
at it as, in terms of the reason why, Heather, the reason why I put it up front is, and read the guidelines, is that we're supposed to be looking in every possible direction based on that. Trust me, I don't want to be doing this, but with the guidelines from the DOR says we have to go look at all the revenues coming in and say, does it make sense with regard to establishing the overlay? And that's why I put that question in there. I put that section in there. Could we go to the next section, please? Did he fall asleep? Okay. Our second option was to essentially, and of course we can't read that. I got it. Second option that we had was that we could basically return to the prior years of 140, 150,000. Go back to what we had. I took out the unusual year back in the other year. It comes in that range, maybe $20,000 a year. Okay, and the DOR is going to ask us to provide proof. Yeah, there's no problem, we can do that. The town could recommend a historic average, stay with what we had, and I don't think that is necessarily appropriate. Because according to the warnings and such, it said you're going to be right at the edge. And so why would we want to do that? I don't know. So anyway, and the other one was some of the numbers, I don't know. Honestly, Heather, you have a lot more experience at guesstimating the numbers and what, and I know you've been fiscally conservative, and that to our benefit, and to your point, that's the reason why after we hit the iceberg, we were able to stay afloat without getting into real trouble. But at the same time, our town is growing well. It's growing, and I'm thinking that you're being a little bit too conservative on the numbers part. So anyway.
We're discussing it with
Right?
you.
What's
right?
that?
Right.
Okay, you'll see in the following sections, so you jumped up.
Well, okay.
Okay. Okay.
So we weren't,
Okay,
just,
next
let me just, so when we asked you to do the research into the overlay, we didn't really need a primer on what the overlay is. What we really want to know is, if you have like 4 different recommendations, let us know what those recommendations and what they're based on, and then we can, otherwise we could be here for quite some time, learning about the overlay.
I'm going to find it.
What are your 4 recommendations? You got 4.
4. I can have 4.
Oh, you got as many as you want, but you told me you had 4, so I'm just taking you at your word.
Where is my sheet? I'm thinking that essentially that line that the state outlined said $120,000 into the overlay. I would support $200,000.
I didn't hear you.
Jack.
Okay.
You need to speak to us.
Okay.
This was for
If you-
us.
Okay, if you go to your OL1, the bottom line is on line number 2. You get the 120,000. Kick
Yes,
kick
yes.
that up to 200,000. That would be my recommendation.
That's your primary recommendation?
All other alternatives.
Okay.
Okay?
And you're-
Go ahead. I want to make 2 other points if I could. Next slide, please.
Use the mic.
Okay, yes, here we go. Move the slides up. Keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. The slides are all out of order here. Paper.
Brian,
Is it up yet? What happened?
No, not yet.
Michael Ray sent a message.
What's the name of the slide?
Just keep going.
I hit a black slide.
I need to interrupt just for a second. I believe the select board doesn't need to be here for the rest of this discussion. I think they would like to adjourn.
They probably
So can we
would.
just take a 1 minute to let them formally finish their meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. I'd like to move for the select board to adjourn as of 8:32. Since we are on Zoom, this will be a roll call vote. Selectman Inke,
Aye.
Selectman Franco. Aye. And I for myself. Thank you for the opportunity for us to be here tonight. I will say it's a little hard hearing this portion of the meeting. The microphone doesn't seem to be near the speaker's mouth, and I'm just a little confused on what's being discussed.
Okay, Mr.
Just want to offer that comment. But again, thank you for the detailed information you were able to provide earlier. We look forward to this really prepared us, in my view, for the tax classification hearing. I'm sure we'll have some questions before then, but thank you for allowing us to be here with you tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the feedback, and I appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Selectman. Okay, one of the other pieces that I would like to point out was essentially the property tax exemption clause. And
Which slide are you on?
It's not an overlay.
go out to,
It's not overlay.
I'm all messed up.
It's, okay.
Okay.
Which slide is that?
I think it's
There's
11.
an exemption slide, so I just put it up.
Okay,
Okay,
you got one?
he's got the exemption slide, yep.
I think it's 11, I
I
think.
didn't realize when I was putting it through there was a fold.
Oh,
And
lost
I
it?
kept feeding it, and it kept missing them all. Okay, is there exemption
So-
slide up there? Okay, the point of it is,
It's not showing up on the,
It's not showing up there. He
not
said he
showing
didn't
up here.
have-
Okay, I'm particularly interested in the clauses with regard to seniors, veterans, and such. And the data would indicate that we're at the lagging significantly, not significantly, but we're lagging. We're at the bottom of the pile in terms of Lunenburg providing 41C assistance.
could you please use the mic?
41C.
I'll implore you to please use the mic, because nobody out there
Okay,
knows what
I'm-
you're saying.
Okay, here we go. 41C. Lunenburg is looking at an age before you become eligible at 70 years old. I'm thinking that we want to take that down to 65, and at the same time, we only allow a $750 allowance, while all the other towns in the area are providing a $1,000 allowance. So let's do that piece. Now, I also understand, Rena, that if you, as you have said, if we help the seniors, we have to help the veterans?
When you double an exemption, or when you increase an exemption, you have to increase them
For
all.
all of us. So,
You have to do the seniors, the veterans, the blind,
all together.
they all have to
together.
be changed.
So,
And it has to go before a town meeting vote.
right. So I'm proposing that perhaps if we want, we can, over the next week or so, put together some numbers that would go along with helping the seniors there and the veterans and the blind folks. I
So
still,
You're proposing that we investigate and figure out how much it would cost us to increase the exemptions
right.
across
And
the
then-
board.
And then potentially draft a warrant.
Okay.
And the warrant, I believe,
And
is
the
due at
impact, the
middle of
reason
month.
that we're talking about this now is because there's a potential impact to the overlay
Right.
in 2025, if it gets passed at the town meeting in May.
Right, we want that in there. So that's the big
Okay.
piece. The other piece was basically questioning why we weren't considering the revenue as high on...
What?
Okay. Okay, I'm not doing well. Can we go to the next slide?
Is it the receivables?
Yes, there it is. Okay. I'm wondering why we thought that the receivables excise tax was going to be down 13%. My meals intake was going to be down 27%. The fees were going to come down 24%. School department revenue was down 62%. I believe that's the other pieces you bring in. Building permits were down 26%. Special assessments were down 16%. Invested income was down 67%. That's probably because we took money out of our savings to pay for the iceberg. And miscellaneous non-recurring was going to be down 39%. Basically, you were suggesting that our receipts are going to come down $957,000 in that coming year. And I'm wondering if maybe we came back and
So
normalized?
We can't.
can you
They're
tie this
estimated.
up with the pro forma recommendation?
Yeah.
Please.
Basically, it's saying receipts, there's a section in there, receipts, and that would affect that, and I was wondering why we had taken it
Would
down.
affect
Mr.
what?
Chair, I think this is getting into what the Finance Committee is
Is this,
Yeah.
doing. It's,
well,
I think it's.
I was hoping to have this tied into the pro forma discussion, and I'm not sure it's tied in. So if you make that connection really quickly, we'll understand, otherwise
Okay.
we're going to move on.
Receivables, personal property tax, no. Vacancy exemptions granted. Overlay balance. Guess what? It's only related to the whole town budget. So I rescind that,
Okay.
that portion.
Thank you. Let's-
Portion of it. And in fact,
So with your suggestion that we try to
I-
investigate increasing the exemptions,
that'd be correct.
and the fact that we've been starting to spend more and more on, out of the overlay, and the fact that there's a possibility we might have an increase in the normal
Exactly, right.
abatements. So you're making a suggestion that we come up with some kind of number, and I'm sure you have one number in mind.
200.
Yeah,
Is it 200?
200. Take it to 200.
Okay.
And we should be okay, I think. But I'm not an expert. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. So I believe in the wisdom of the masses, and especially the masses that know what's been going on, and it has a history behind it. So I'm pulling that 200. Again, to the point, we're looking at another major group of people running at the door. I don't know what the impact is. After listening to Mike tonight, I'm saying, oh, I'm more comfortable in terms of defending our numbers. So, yeah, 200 is comfortable.
So we'd like to make a motion that we support a number of 200,000 for the...
Yes.
The implications of changing the overlay, we can change it on a yearly basis, up or down, I think.
Let Heather's go.
Yes,
With-
before you vote, could I?
Please, that's why I wanted to check.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is a recommendation on the overlay account for the following fiscal year, so everyone's clear. This year's number was on the pro forma recap. It's
Right.
120,000 for this year.
So we
The
can't change it.
cumulative amount that we have available right now is $562,546.31.
Right.
The fiscal '25 amount would be added to that balance after town meeting, so for fiscal '25 for next year's. So keep that in mind as well. It is a number that is raised on the recap. It's a recommendation that I would have to account for in the budget, so it's not a number that's appropriated at town meeting. It's raised on the recap when the assessors vote on the valuations and submit that.
And so my follow-up question was, is there any implications to following years? Are we tied into some kind of increase or not? I suspect not, but
No, if there's
the reason I ask is, I know that in the library world, if you increase your funding to the library, the next year that's your starting point, so you then have to increase your funding to the library beyond that. In this case, I don't think that's the case, but I just wanted to confirm that before we voted on anything.
That's correct, an accurate statement.
Okay.
So if it was voted a higher number than previous years, but what you would want to consider is you have a history of the abatements that were granted exemptions, so you rely on that data as a point of reference. You have the information. One of the points in reviewing the recommendation for overlay, you're going through a reval year, so obviously you've seen and heard what the process is, how deep dive they go into the valuation, and all the data behind that, and how that should stand up for any
It's
objections
defensible.
to, right, to the values, so it's defensible.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Anything further, or are you ready
No,
to
I
make a motion?
believe it'll be defensible. And if you look at some of the trends, yeah, why not? And if you take out like I said, the 1.4 million, we're probably okay. And given the fact that we are running into a big unknown, yeah, kick it
So
up.
we have 562, I'll call it in the bank. Now, we're going to be spending some of that on some of the exemptions we just signed, et cetera. So that's going to go down a bit, but it's not going to go down significantly. And if we
it's
add
not.
200 to that, then we'd have something around
Yeah, the
$750,000.
200 is on top of just take it up to 200, not
Available.
200 more.
No, I know.
Okay.
Well, no,
It is.
it automatically gets added to that pile, because it's one account, so
Right.
yes.
Excuse me?
If I can,
Right.
yeah, or, I don't know if Rena's going to say this.
Well, I think Heather just said it's on the pro forma recap sheet.
At 120.
The 120 for
Right,
fiscal
so-
'24.
Don't we have to stick to that number then?
Yes.
Yes.
For
24.
'24, you have to stick to that
Right.
number.
We have to
This is
stick- 'cause
what
it's on
I'm
the pro
asking is
forma.
for '25.
Right.
Fiscal '25.
I think that's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Maybe I wasn't clear.
But I also want to make clear as well that this impacts the budget overall.
Correct?
So any additional money that may be excessive affects the overall budget.
Right. Right.
Right.
So,
So if we put up a higher number, we would have taken down the available cash for doing other parts of the operation.
That's correct.
yes.
Yeah, so that's why we didn't push it, and we're kind of saying DOR, they'll probably accept it, given the fact that we're allowed to have, assignable causes that we can point out that aren't there. So, yeah, my
So
number
we're
is,
in a so we have three reasons. We're in a reval year.
yeah,
We don't know what the history is now because we don't know what to expect.
Right.
Because we
There's
are
a change.
1 year removed from what our normal is. And if we were, normal is, yes. And if we were to suggest increases in exemptions, then that would come out of that same pot.
That's correct.
So you have 3 reasons to try to increase it, to want to suggest to increase it from what we've done historically, which was around the 120 mark, to something closer to 200.
130.
So,
Okay. Yeah,
and that has to unfortunately come out of the rest of the budget.
and it is an assignable cause, and we just don't
And
know
the-
what the impact is
The
going to
question
be.
is, do we believe we'll have success in increasing exemptions, which is a
Right.
possibility that it could be turned down by town meeting.
And there's a whole discussion with regard to our levy limit and our ceiling, and when was the last time we did that? And if we needed to reach into that, I'm not saying the word override, but perhaps based on, well, look, by the way, we have
So,
We have room. We have room.
I don't think we want to go down that route, because
No.
that's a different discussion. Like, doing an override, all that kind of stuff, that's not what we're doing right here.
Yeah, all I was trying to do is point out that
Overlay.
there is room based on we're supposed to be doing the levy calculations, and there was room, and that's in your file as material as well.
Oh, so
I-
did that mean you just backed off the 200, or you?
No, I'm saying
Okay.
that 200, I'm okay with that. It's just that if given the cutbacks that have been speculated, there may be that need, if it comes up, yeah.
I'm just going to tell you, I'm not inclined to increase the amount. I think we have, and I'm hopeful, but I have seen the data that we have coming in through Vision. I think it's really well established. I think that we have enough in the overlay fund for this upcoming year. I understand there's a desire to increase other things and exemptions. However, I think we should go with what has been recommended, 120,000.
Now, where did the recommendation come from? Heather, did you put the 120 in there?
That was my recommendation.
Okay, so they didn't come out of the DOR's calculations then? That was just the sheet that they generated based
Just
on?
looking at an average.
Yeah, average on
If you look at the-
average.
well,
And if you
we
notice,
sent
that
you
some
the
of them they go up to
information.
139, plus we have that possible pot of money. And I don't know how we got, where did we get the money to pay all that down, Heather? The 1.4, where did that come from?
Oh,
Free cash.
Free cash? So will that empty our free cash reserve
That was free cash from last
from
year.
last year? And we had that money? Yeah, that's right, we had 2 million or something like that sitting there. Okay. Yeah,
so I don't think that's part of this discussion.
I agree.
Where that money came from, while I'm curious too, and
well,
I kind of knew that it came out of free cash, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, well, I did the history from year to year, and I said, how did we pull that much money out under the impression that we had to empty out
So,
that overlay account first? So,
we have, if you looked at the 5 years, the 4 years prior to last year, our average was about 128, and we were heading up close to
trending up
130.
to 130,
But we weren't trending up to 200.
right. But we
Um,
didn't come in to a situation quite like this.
So we're looking at this year saying we're doing total reval, and how much do we think we need to increase it for abatements and potential exemption increases? I would suggest that since we have money already in that account, if we wanted to increase it to 130 or 140, that's okay, but
Yeah.
starting to pull money out of the budget for putting it into an additional savings account, to me, doesn't really make any
Right.
sense.
In the warnings.
I would support something more in the range of 130 to 140.
Okay, DOR gave us some warnings, and I've lost my sheet, but.
Well, we've read the warnings.
Yeah, you got the warnings, you got the warnings there. And they're saying that
I
future
read through the
potential
whole packet
unplanned
while you were talking.
expenditures are more than what we had with the 110.
Sorry?
Okay, towards the bottom of that, you're going to see a series of future possible unanticipated expenditures in that chart. And that became part of the warning, the second warning that says, hey, you might not have enough there. I'm sure we can come up with
The
it.
warning I saw said, we suggest not taking this out as surplus.
I'm sorry.
Don't reduce the surplus.
Don't reduce the surplus.
It
That
isn't
was
really
the
a
warning.
surplus because it's the same account.
Yeah.
Right.
But don't
Don't take
reduce,
this out.
don't treat it as though it were surplus.
Right,
Don't
and-
send it somebody.
And what we
somebody else.
That's
have
the
right
warning.
I
now.
think that's the warning,
Clear.
not,
Yeah.
not that we
That's
don't
the
have
warning.
enough.
And the warning that we have indicates that we didn't have enough at 120.
Not
No.
exactly. You're misreading it, I think, Mr. Rabbit.
Possible. If I can find the sheet.
So I haven't heard a second to your proposal to set the overlay at 200 for next year. So without a second, I'm going to ask for another motion.
I totally understand. I'm going to the wisdom of the masses here. I'm bowing to anything you guys think, because we're going to have to live with it, right? And I'm thinking that kick up, and based on that warning, it's putting us in a safer spot. If it's okay to go less, it certainly increases the risk that DOR had highlighted, that's all.
If
you
we
want
accept,
110, that's fine.
if we accept things as they are, right now, there's 562,000
Right.
approximately in the overlay balance. This year, we're adding another 120,000. That puts us at roughly 680. And then next year, 120,000. Now, obviously, we will have,
No. You just can only talk about 2025.
oh, you're right.
We're adding.
We're adding 120.
We're adding some amount.
Yes,
To what is.
Already here.
562 and will be
Yes.
reduced somewhat.
it will be reduced
Not
somewhat.
much.
But historically, not that much. And we just had a reeval with
We're right in
a
the middle
lot
of it.
of work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Future potential liabilities. They identified the future potential liabilities at 400 and...
I'd like to make a motion that we accept 120,000 for the next fiscal year.
I'd say nay.
So
Oh, we're
we
not.
can open it for
Sorry.
discussion.
It has to be
I
seconded.
will second it so we can open it for discussion. Only so we can open it for discussion.
Okay. I'm
So
reading...
from my perspective, I know you're pushing for a much higher number, and I get that. I don't think we need a much higher number, but I think it's justifiable to come up with a higher number of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Be that, as I said, 130, 140. I don't think we need to go beyond that because we have money set aside already in the overlay, and I don't think we're going to be tapping it.
Well, Which
I
is,
think our annual spend is going to be closer to 130.
Heather.
In
Can I
abatements
just,
too?
sorry, Mr. Chair.
In everything.
I hope.
I mean, fiscal year 2022 says 132, fiscal year 2021 says 139,000.
Yep.
But we have a pretty significant surplus in there right now.
So if I might,
Sure. Go ahead.
town manager would like to speak?
Thank you. I just want to make it, whatever numbers voted is in addition to that 562. It's not saying you're going to allot 120 or 130 out of that 562. Okay.
It's in
I-
addition.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah.
Okay.
that's
I-
why we're talking
Right.
about going to 680 something. It would become, the pot becomes
Right.
680 something.
Right.
And then it needs to be, can be spent down for those purposes that are currently determined here, that we already talked about, so I'm not going to go through that.
We're good.
Um,
Thank you.
If it can't be used for anything else,
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to ask you to go take a look at the OL1 sheet, lines 9 through 12, excuse me. They call it potential future liabilities.
I think you're misreading that one. I don't know how to tell you that any other way. I think you're misreading it.
Okay, real estate receivables as of, okay, these are 2023, I apologize for that. The receivables still outstanding. Okay, how I came up with my calculation then was I took the 468, and they came back and told us in part number 1 that the allowance for the abatements overlay is 120,000. is less than the OL line 6 through 5 5-year average. Okay.
Because the 5-year average has that.
Taking that off the table. Okay, lines, second one, total potential future liabilities, line 12 exceeds the overlay balance available in line 8. Please use caution when transferring overlay to overlay surplus, as there is an insufficient overlay balance to cover the future
So
liabilities.
there's no longer an overlay surplus. So what they're telling you is don't take the money out of your
Don't
overlay
take any out of
account.
it, but they're
So
telling
we're
you
not
also
taking-
you don't have
We're
enough.
not taking anything out of our overlay account. We're adding to the overlay account. The question is, how much do we want to add to the overlay account?
Okay,
If you can answer that question, then I think we can move on.
I would put another 80,000 on top of the 120, and that would give you the clearance. that
So
you
the
need.
motion right now is
Oh,
120. You're suggesting...
I'd like to
an
make an amendment to that motion.
No second? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Then I retract my motion
No.
for the 200,000,
So-
and I would support the 120.
Well, as I said, historically, we've now seen 130-ish. So would you mind amending your number to 130? Or not? If you're pretty stuck on 120, I'm okay with that, but I think, because I think we'll survive it.
I think we will survive it, and my concern is this, if we do believe that we should be increasing it, then we need to, I think, push for this, timing-wise, and before the budget is coming out for the next fiscal year. I think with the way our abatement, or our reeval came out, I think we're late on this, and I'm concerned about the long-term impacts on our budget here, but also this fiscal year coming up. And I respect that we want to increase, there's effort to increase exemptions for people, but I think also that's premature. I think it needs to be discussed at town meeting before I will take action on that, because I think there's, as been brought up repeatedly, a lot going on in town, and I'm not willing to increase the taxes for anyone beyond what we're seeing in assessment. And I'm just not sure with such a large surplus that I can legitimately support increasing.
We don't use the word surplus. We have a bank account.
Okay, sorry. With the balance currently in our bank account that will continue to increase as I see it so far, I don't support going beyond what has already been allocated at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to point out that if we look at the overlay sheet, line 9, and you look at the history of what we had for receivables, back in 2019, we're 653,000, and then it's kind of eroded. By 2021, it was 515, and now it is 367,992, 368,000. It's down almost 45%.
Over, not 1 year, but several.
Over the period of time.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so we're looking at those liabilities of diminishing, and meantime, our assessors, our planning group has come back and said, hey, look forward to having reduced income coming in. So I'm thinking we need to be in a conservative mode and put a little bit off the side. By the way, we can release it. If all of a sudden we don't have 400 people at the door seeking abatements, then yeah, we'll take the number down right away. I agree it's past that time where, in terms of what the budgets were set, but it doesn't stop us from having another town meeting later on in the fall, and we bring it back in.
Thank you for that input.
Thank you.
Any more conversation? The motion is still for 120. It's been seconded. Any more?
You heard my case?
Okay. I'll call for a vote then on the motion to set the overlay figure at 120 for the 2025 budget.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye?
You can
I
say no if
disagree
you
with
want.
No, no.
You can say- you absolutely can say no. I don't want-
We're a team. If we're gonna take a hit, let's take it all together.
Well-
And if we succeed, let's all
We're-
succeed together.
we're-
Okay?
Thank you, Jeff.
No,
Thank
thank
you,
you. Sarah, that's why you're so valuable.
Okay.
You'll challenge, and that's good.
What's next?
We need to talk about our next meetings.
Oh, geez. Wait, give it more than a week, or 2, 3 days.
We probably can't afford to,
I
but
don't
go
think so.
ahead.
No, I'm only kidding. Only kidding.
And what would we want on the agenda? Because, again, we're still in the middle of this, what do you call it? Data sprint?
So I've gone through most of the residential stuff, but I want us to coincide that spreadsheet of abatements with the spreadsheet that's been given. And I think we should do that before we meet to discuss those again.
So pull the abatements into the residential,
Yeah.
okay? For next week.
Yeah.
We have most of it.
We have most of it. It can be done by next week.
All the work that we've been doing over the past weekend, auditing the abatement log,
Yeah.
has actually been able to, allowed us to start to feed that information in, so we should be able to
Thanks
have
for
that
doing that today
by-
and yesterday
on Saturday.
and Saturday. Yeah.
Sure.
And then we should, I think, go through all that, the commercial, industrial. I'm missing something.
Should we ask Mike to be available to us on Zoom?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because he has to come from,
Yeah, I don't want to put him through the,
yeah.
He gave us an overview of it, but
we haven't seen
it
the data.
just showed up today, right?
It showed up about 11:30.
Yeah, I just drove home and then came here, so
There you go.
I haven't gotten to look at it yet. And so he gave me, it was nice to get the overview before I look at the data. That'll make it easier to understand the spreadsheets. But I think we may still have some questions on Monday night.
In all likelihood.
Yeah. Is there a room available?
No.
Of course not. Yeah. Alternatively, I can come on Wednesday if that helps, but at 6:45. I could do Tuesday, but I don't know. I think Tuesday's an off-limits day for somebody else in this group.
It is, and Wednesday is, if Monday is the 12th, right?
Yep. Oh,
And Wednesday's
Valentine's.
Valentine's Day, you sure you don't?
Oh, don't.
We're
bring-
not going to do Wednesday. Unless we had to.
Yeah.
But I will try to find a location and set up all the logistics for a meeting on February 12th. Anything else we want to make sure gets covered in that meeting, because we've taken a lot of stuff off the agenda so we can focus on this.
Yeah, if I could just build on Sarah's, the commercial buildings, and in terms of he's used a value method, an
Well,
income
for
value.
commercial-
Income and economics.
Yeah,
For commercial, there are 3 different options, and you have to
Yeah.
use 2 of them, so he's
Right,
chosen
right.
2. Right?
so I'm wondering what he did with, in terms of the Walmart building, and for that matter, the Unitil building.
Well, we'll take a look
I
at,
haven't looked at that yet, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
we'll take a look at that, and we can ask specific questions of that time. at
But
that
yeah,
time.
so I think we do need them.
Anything else we want to put on the agenda for next week?
Do you, will we be ready for the, we'll have the information for the residentials.
We're
with the
going to have
abatements.
to approve the numbers shortly, because
Yeah.
it has to go through, actually, we should do that next week.
So we should plan that Monday to approve.
Well, unless something comes out of the commercial industrial thing that we didn't anticipate.
But we need to approve the residential so it can get put into a map, right?
Well, it won't get put into a map till after the DOR has approved
Right.
it, and.
So it
it's
has
come
to
back
go
Yeah.
from us to DOR to that and then back
For
again.
preliminary approval.
So I think we,
Correct, Rena? Preliminary approval? Yeah.
Preliminary
so
certification.
that should be a vote on, that should be on our agenda.
So residential
Yeah,
vote.
yep.
Mr. Chairman? With regard to the neighborhood 1, 1A, and 1B, Sarah, what are those?
Those are the average, the good, average,
the
and
three-
below average
Oh, okay, these are the
waterfront.
lake ones,
Yep.
okay, they're all
And then
ones.
2,
Okay.
3, 4, 5 are residential.
Right, okay.
The other residential that's
residential.
not on the lake.
Ah,
Correct.
huh, so all the lakes they changed
From the 2023
Pre,
right.
pre-abatement.
pre-abatement numbers, yes.
And so
I'm trying to
we-
keep that as clear as possible.
We want to go through, and what we're talking about with the spreadsheet, Jack, is we're going to put in the values that we have for the abatements and compare them to the values that Mike generated and his team
Right.
generated.
And then we
And
can
then
do-
we're going to give the actual percent change
For homeowners.
for homeowners. Like how their value, their abated value
Right.
compares to the new value.
So what, showing up on the property cards, or something in the middle, is that what?
Nope, the
No.
2023 values, for the beginning of
Yeah.
2023 values. The
And-
abated values are not included on the property
Yeah.
cards.
Right. So
Yeah.
whatever's sitting on that card right now for them.
It's from
is-
January
From January, they can come back and assume that
2023.
they've taken down. If they do the number and they say,
So
oh, okay.
we know what the abatements are, we have that list.
Mhm.
So we're going to try to populate all that data. That's why I spent so much time on it.
Yeah,
We're going to try to populate that back into the spreadsheet so that we can then do calculations like Mike did
Mhm.
to see what the ratios are
So-
from the abated values.
From
cold, I'm not
prior
leaving.
Pre-abatement. Right.
What?
It's from the pre-abatement.
Mike
So-
did pre-abatement.
Right.
It's done.
So,
It's preliminary,
yeah,
but the work is done. The calculations have been done against these preliminary numbers.
Okay,
We
so,
may spot something in the abatement analysis. I don't know.
so we're going to do the residential, potentially vote, we're going to do the commercial, and have questions for Mike.
Well, yeah, but we're going to have to vote on that piece too shortly.
But we'll at least, we'll prepare our questions for Mike about the commercial
Yeah.
stuff for Monday.
okay.
Okay, I can get that done this week.
If we can get them to him beforehand, then he can answer them for us.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thursday night.
I'm going to try not do anything else for that meeting because that looks like plenty.
That seems like enough. Do we need to schedule the meeting to approve the commercial stuff while we're sitting here?
How about Valentine's Day?
I thought you were trying to save my social life.
Jane and I had to go through a
I
calendar to
really
find out
hope
when we could meet.
my husband is not watching this video right now.
His name's not up there, so I think we're okay.
It's the 14th.
I can't do Wednesdays.
We can't,
Is
she,
anybody
Rena can't do Wednesday.
potentially available on a Thursday?
I could do Thursday.
Rena's
No, you
not,
should.
okay. I
Okay.
really want to have Rena there.
How about
Yeah.
Friday night?
You're going to hell.
Not yet.
Not yet.
It would depend on a Thursday night. It would have to be like 6:30 because I have to pick kids up.
Can you make it back for 6:30
Me? Yeah, I can.
on a Thursday?
The 8th?
Thursday's my family night, so we don't have anything planned on Thursdays, but I can make it.
We could try to do it, well, what's the soonest you could get back here for a Thursday evening?
Me? I have to stay after till hopefully 4:30. I could probably get here by 5:30.
What day are we talking?
5:30, Thursday, the
It's an open-
15th.
The
It's
15th.
an open meeting, right?
It would be an open meeting.
Yeah. My kiddo can watch.
Oh,
I'm good.
mom at work,
Yeah,
or not at work. Mom at volunteer.
yeah.
So I will try to set something up for February 12th and again on February 15th to close all of the remainder of the
February 15th on Thursday.
February 15th.
Okay,
If you
30.
think, are you,
I could only, it would have to be after 6:30.
oh, after?
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh,
I
shoot.
have to pick the kids up.
I
Okay.
can do after.
It's my daughter's late night, so I
I
have
can
to,
do it.
I have to pick the kids up.
That's just,
6:30?
Yeah,
that's your family night, though.
6:30?
yeah, so no long-winded discussions.
You're in trouble when you get home.
So I will attempt to set up two meetings, one for February 12th at 6:30, one for February 15th at 6:30. We'll get a location, those will both be public meetings. And we'll figure out after that.
Okay.
We do know that the 19th is a holiday, so we're not doing that following Monday, so we really have to be done because we need to get this stuff
Well,
so
the
that
public
the
thing's the 26th.
POR
Yep.
can be done by the 21st, so we can meet on the 26th.
The
We
13th.
can, I'm
for
sorry?
Classification.
No, but I was still in February.
Mhm.
Oh.
We need to do the public disclosure on the 26th, so all DOR has to be done, we have to be done, with all the preliminary numbers.
So, yeah, we really need to do this.
And they're only
next week.
preliminary at that point because we'll wait for feedback from the taxpayers.
What did you say that we had to do public disclosure on? What else?
The
Public
26th.
20
disclosure has to be done on the 26th
Yep.
Okay.
to March 4th. It's a period, 5-day, 5 working day, 5 business day period.
Do we want to
Yeah.
try to cram in commercial this week?
Well, you mean at a meeting?
Yeah.
I think we should.
What's the rest of this week look like for anybody else?
I have 3 superintendent search meetings Monday through Wednesday.
All right,
We
then.
could do
let's just-
Friday night.
Let's, the building's not open on Fridays.
Oh, it's not?
It's not a business day for the
So
town of,
limiting.
town
So
of
limiting.
Lunenburg.
Okay,
So,
Were we looking
February
at the
12th and the 15th, we'll figure out after
all
that.
right,
You want to do the 8th?
Can't.
Can't?
can't,
Rena's, okay.
okay.
Okay. Now,
And
else we
Wednesday,
got
the
on
7th is too soon.
what else we got on here? We have
We
to
still have public-
open up for
Public
public
comment.
comments. Any public comment? What?
Huh?
We talked about
We
that.
just, yeah,
I read the whole thing and
that was,
Yeah,
and
I read that and then there was no further, well, we talked about other
other ways we would.
opportunities for communicating with the public, including putting up that board that we talked about. And yeah, yep, I'm sorry. I probably should have ticked it off more eloquently. Sorry? Second, oh.
Impact notice for the
The-
second homeowner.
We have to send out an impact notice for the second homeowners, and we've actually got a draft of that.
Yeah, that's true, we did not.
We did not cover
not
that
talk
piece of
about
it.
that. Thank you.
We'll put it back on the agenda for the 15th. I'm sorry, for the
12th?
12th or the 16th? You get two.
Monday?
12th.
12th.
Because I want to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
Thank you
no,
for
no, we should
bringing
get
that
it
to my
done.
attention, Mr. Luck.
Get it done.
Okay, and that's mostly for out-of-town people, but I know there are second homeowners here in town, so that should be, okay. Any other public comment?
Oh, I do. I apologize.
Any other board comment?
I went too wide in the net based on what I thought I was supposed to do. But anyway, I apologize for that.
No?
It fell apart. I'm going to kill the Xerox machine. I'm going to kick that when I leave. And, oh, shit.
I think it was a simpler assignment than you'd anticipated, so.
You had me scared. I had to look at it from every angle I could possibly, and based on the,
That's fine.
You can
And-
make little shredded worms and
Any other
use it for
board-
packing material.
Any other board comment? Rena, anything you'd like to share?
I'd like to go home.
Rena wants to go home. All right, then I will, wait a minute, do I have to do anything else?
No.
I think not.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? It's unanimous at 9:15.